Welcome back to Read by Angelique. I am Angelique, and today we are continuing on with our reading of The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. In our last reading, in the last video, we read chapters 13 and 14. For a quick recap, I'll just go through it quickly. So, Raoul and Christine had just met on the roof. They had thought they had seen a ghost, right? And they hatched a plan that Christine was going to leave with Raoul the next night after she performs for the last time. Okay. But while they're talking, they think that they see someone on the roof. So they run away, and they're kind of creeped out. They're like, no, that surely it was just stars that was tricking our eyes. And Raoul was like, if it was him, I should have gone and killed him. And Christine's like, no, like that is not, please don't. That's ridiculous. And it would have been suicidal for you to try to climb the statue that was hanging off the roof of the opera house. And then that night, Christine starts acting strange a little bit, and he's like, I'm just gonna leave her to figure it out. I'll see you tomorrow night. I need to make plans for the next day, blah, blah, blah. That night, he goes to bed, but when he tries to fall asleep, he can't fall asleep because he keeps seeing eyes above his bed. And he's like, Christine said that, and everyone that have seen the ghost says that the ghost's eyes burn bright red or like fire, but you can only see them at night. And when the lights are on, the fire goes out. And so that's what happened to him. He like turned on a lamp and the lights went away. And then when he blew out the lights came back. And he couldn't tell if it was in front of his bed in his room or if it was outside the balcony window that was like facing his bed. So he starts getting really paranoid. He looks outside, doesn't see anything, goes back in bed. And then he reaches for the revolver in his bedside table, pulls it out, points it at the right above the eyeballs that he thinks is staring back at him, and shoots. His butler rushes in. Eventually his brother comes, and he keeps talking about Eric and the ghost and shooting this person and maybe I'm going crazy, blah, blah, blah. But when he walks out his balcony, there's actually blood, and it leads going up to the roof. And he's like, do ghosts bleed? No, they don't. It's a man. And the butler or the brother, I can't remember which, is like, it wasn't a man. You just shot a cat. But they didn't have any evidence. So the next day, he has a meeting with his brother and kind of divulges everything that's happening with Christine, that they're leaving, everything about the ghost. And the brother's like, you're crazy. Also, you're like a Viscount. You can't marry her anyway. It's really degrading. She's way below your station. So just forget about this girl. Leave the ghost alone. You're delusional. Move on. Like, this is just young love. And you need to just live life without her, okay? But he's like, yeah, whatever. I'm not doing that. So he spends the whole day planning their trip away. So he gets a carriage ready. He makes gets food and all the different things to make this long journey with Christine. They're gonna leave at midnight. And then he realizes there is an article that comes out in the newspaper that morning, right before the performance, the morning of the performance, that says that Raoul and Christine have had a secret engagement. So he's like, who in the world has spilled this information? How did it get out? I think that's why he like starts talking with his brother. He gets really frustrated. And then that night at the ball, it's packed because everyone's like, this is gonna be good. Christine's singing, Raoul might be there, there's drama going on. We just want to be there. So it is full to the brim. And everything kind of goes off without a hitch. Raoul's brother is sitting alone in his box. Everyone's looking around, kind of talking about, they see how worried Raoul's brother is. And Raoul is sitting in the middle of the theater. He's watching, but we don't really have much going on other than that. Christine's singing. She goes on stage, and during this pinnacle moment, she's singing, and then the lights go out. It gets completely black, and then they come on, and Christine is gone. She's disappeared. Raoul stands up in the middle of the theater and just watches. The whole place erupts into chaos, and nobody knows what happened. So there's this big, just running around, people trying to figure out what's the manager backstage is trying to figure out what's going on. They realize that the manager of the lights, the guy that takes care of the gas and everything, he's missing. Anyone underneath him that should have been also like his apprentices, they are also gone. Can't find them. The owners are locked up in their office, and they said, do not bother us at any costs. Like, whatever happens, don't bother us. But they're like, okay, this is like a circumstance where I think we can break the rules. And so they go and they try to get a hold of them, but they won't answer and they won't answer. And finally, when they do, one of the managers walks out and he's like, a safety pin, I need a safety pin. He's acting like a lunatic. And this boy hears him that works at the opera and runs and brings him a safety pin. And then he grabs it, goes inside, locks the door. And that's all she wrote, basically, on that. And the managers kind of keep conversing, and they're like, what's going on? There's 3 of them talking. 2 of them are kind of in the loop about the chaos, and one of them's like, you guys are hiding stuff. What is actually going on here? He's asking questions. He has sent for the commissioner, whatever, the police to come. And they're just all talking about every crazy thing that's going on, and they're blaming the ghost, obviously. Raoul comes back, asks if anyone's seen Christine, and they're like, no, dude, we haven't. And then they ask for, the managers asked for Mother Geary, the lady that was fired and then rehired. But when they bring her in, they lock her into the office and kind of leave her there. So she's screaming in the office, and then the managers start walking around, but they're doing odd things. And they had been doing odd things all day, like walking backwards from places and touching weird things and just odd stuff. And no one knows what is going on. Okay, so that's, let me see. So the last chapter that we read, chapter 14, ends with Raoul going backstage and being like, where's Christine? And that's where we're picking up. Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux, chapter 15. Christine, Christine. Raoul's first thought, after Queen Daye's fantastic disappearance, was to accuse Eric. He no longer doubted the almost supernatural powers of the angel of music, in this domain of the opera where he had set up his empire. And Raoul rushed onto the stage in a mad fit of love and despair. Christine! Christine! He moaned, calling to her as he felt that she must be calling to him from the depths of that dark pit to which the monster had carried her. Christine! Christine! And he seemed to hear the girl's screams through the frail boards that separated him from her. He bent forward. He listened. He wandered over the stage like a madman. Oh, to descend into that pit of darkness, every entrance to which was closed to him. For the stairs that led below the stage were forbidden to everybody that night. Christine! Christine! People pushed him aside, laughing. They made fun of him. They thought the poor lover's brain was gone. But what mad road, through what black, mysterious passages known to himself alone, had Eric dragged that pure-souled child to the awful haunt, with the Louis Philippe room opening on the lake? Christine! Christine! Why don't you answer? Are you alive? Hideous thoughts flashed through Raoul's congested brain. Of course, Eric must have discovered their secret, must have known that Christine had played him false. What a vengeance would be his! And Raoul thought again of the yellow stars that had come the night before and roamed over his balcony. Why had he not put them out for good? There were some men's eyes that dilated in the dark and shone like stars or like cat's eyes. Certain albinos, who seemed to have rabbit's eyes by day, had cat's eyes at night. Everybody knew that. Yes, yes, he had undoubtedly fired at Eric. Why had he not killed him? The monster had fled up the gutter spout like a cat or a convict, who everybody knew that also would scale the very skies with the help of a gutter spout. No doubt, Eric was at that moment contemplating some decisive step against Raoul, but he had been wounded and had escaped, only to turn against poor Christine instead. Such were the cruel thoughts that haunted Raoul as he ran to the singer's dressing room. "Christine! Christine!" Bitter tears scorched the boy's eyelids as he saw scattered over the furniture the cloths which his beautiful bride was to have worn at the hour of their flight. Oh, oh! Why had she refused to leave earlier? Why had she delayed? Why had she toyed with the threatening catastrophe? Why toyed with the monster's heart? Why, in a final access of pity, had she insisted on flinging as a last sop to that demon's soul her divine song? Holy angel in heaven blessed, my spirit longs for thee to rest. Raoul, his throat filled with sobs, oaths, and insults, fumbled awkwardly at the great mirror that had opened one night before his eyes to let Christine pass to the murky dwelling below. He pushed, pressed, groped about, but the glass apparently obeyed no one but Eric. Perhaps actions were not enough with a glass of that kind. Perhaps he was expected to utter certain words. When he was a little boy, he had heard that there were things that obeyed the spoken word. Suddenly, Raoul remembered something about a gate opening into the Rue Scribe, an underground passage running straight from the Rue Scribe to the lake. Yes, Christine had told him about that, and when he found that the key was no longer in the box, he nevertheless ran to the Rue Scribe. Outside in the streets, he passed his trembling hands over the huge stones, felt for openings, came upon iron bars. Were those they? Or these? Or could it be that air hole? He plunged his useless eyes through the bars. How dark it was in there. He listened. All was silent. He went around the building and came to bigger bars, immense gates. It was the entrance to the Cour de la Administration. Raoul rushed into the doorkeeper's lodge. "I beg your pardon, madam, but could you tell me where to find a gate or a door made of bars, iron bars, opening in the Rue Scribe and leading to the lake? You know the lake, I mean. The lake, the underground lake, under the opera." "Yes, sir. I know there's a lake under the opera, but I don't know which door leads to it. I have never been there." "And the Rue Scribe, madame, the Rue Scribe? Have you never been to the Rue Scribe?" The woman laughed, screamed with laughter. Raoul darted away, roaring with anger, ran upstairs 4 steps at a time, ran downstairs, rushed through the whole of the business side of the opera house, found himself once more in the light of the tray. He stopped with his heart thumping in his chest. Suppose Christine Daae had been found? He saw a group of men and asked, "I beg your pardon, gentlemen, but could you tell me where Christine Daae is?" And somebody laughed. At the same moment, the stage buzzed with a new sound, and amid a crowd of men in evening dress, all talking and gesticulating together, appeared a man who seemed very calm and displayed a pleasant face, all pink and chubby, crowned with curly hair and lit up with a pair of wonderfully clear blue eyes. Mercier, the acting manager, drew the Vicomte de Chagny's attention to him and said, "This is the gentleman to whom you should put your question, monsieur. Let me introduce Monsieur Mifroid, the commissary of police." "Ah, Monsieur le Vicomte de Chagny. Delighted to meet you, monsieur," said the commissary. "Would you mind coming with me? And now, where are the managers? Where are the managers?" Mercier did not answer, and Remy, the secretary, volunteered the information that the managers were locked up in their office and knew nothing of what had happened. "You don't mean to say so? Let us go to the office." And Monsieur Mifroid followed by an ever-increasing crowd, turned toward the business side of the building. Morcerf took advantage of the confusion to slip a key into Gabriel's hand. "This is all going very badly," he whispered. "You had better let Mother Giry out." And Gabriel moved away. They soon came to the manager's door. Morcerf stormed in vain, and the door remained closed. "Open in the name of the law!" commanded Monsieur Mifroid, in a loud and rather anxious voice. At last the door opened. All rushed into the office on the commissary's heels. Raoul was the last to enter. As he was following the others into the room, a hand was laid on his shoulder, and he heard these words spoken in his ear. "Eric's secrets concern no one but himself." He turned around with a stifled exclamation. The hand that had been laid on his shoulder was now placed on the lips of a person with an ebony skin, with eyes of jade, and with an astrachan cap on his head. The Persian. The stranger continued the gesture, recommending discretion, and then, at the moment when the astonished Viscount was about to ask the reason of his mysterious interventions, bowed and disappeared. End of chapter 14. Okay. Oh, 15. That was chapter 15. Chapter 16. Mame Giry and the Ghost. Before following the commissary into the manager's office, I must describe some extraordinary events that took place in that office, where Remy and Morcerf had vainly tried to obtain admission, and where M.M. Richard and Moncharmin had locked themselves in for a reason which the reader does not yet know, but which it is my duty as an historian to reveal without further delay. I have had occasion to say that the manager's mood had undergone a change for the worse for some time past, and to convey the fact that this change was due not only to the fall of the chandelier on the famous night of the gala performance. The reader must know that the ghost had calmly received his first 20,000 francs. Oh, there had been wailing and gnashing of teeth indeed, and yet the thing had happened as simply as could be. One morning, the managers found on their table an envelope ready addressed to Monsieur O.G., private and accompanied by a note from O.G. himself. "The time has come to carry out the clause in the lease. Please put 20 notes of 1,000 francs each into this envelope, seal it with your own seal, and hand it to Madame Giry, who has my instructions." The managers did not hesitate. Without wasting time in inquiring how those confounded communications came to be delivered in an office which they were careful to keep locked, they seized this opportunity of laying hands on the mysterious blackmailer, and, after telling the whole story, under promise of secrecy to Gabriel and Morcerf, they put the 20,000 francs into the envelope, and without asking for explanations, handed it to Madame Giry, who had been reinstated in her functions. The box-keeper displayed no astonishment. I need hardly say that she was well watched. She went straight to the ghost box and placed the precious envelope in the little shelf attached to the ledge. The two managers, as well as Gabriel and Morcerf, were hidden in such a way that they did not lose sight of the envelope for a second during the performance, and even afterwards, for, as the envelope had not been moved, those who watched it did not move either. The theatre emptied, and Madame Giry went away while the managers, Gabriel and Morcerf, were still there. At last they became tired of waiting and opened the envelope, after ascertaining that the seals had not been broken. At first sight, Richard and Moncharmin thought that the notes were still there. But soon they perceived that they were not the same. The 20 real notes were gone and had been replaced by 20 notes of the Bank of St. Frank. The manager's rage and fright were unspeakable. Moncharmin wanted to send for the commissary of police, but Richard objected. He no doubt had a plan of his own, for he said, "Don't let us make ourselves ridiculous. All Paris would laugh at us. O.G. has won the first game. He will win the second." He was evidently thinking of the next month's allowance. Nevertheless, they had been so absolutely tricked that they were bound to feel a certain dejection, and, upon my word, it was not difficult to understand. We must not forget that the managers had an idea at the back of their minds that this strange incident might, all the time, be only an unpleasant practical joke on the part of their predecessors, and that it would not do to divulge it prematurely. On the other hand, Moncharmin was sometimes touched with suspicion of Richard himself, who occasionally had queer ideas. And so they were content to await events while keeping an eye on Mother Giry. Richard would not have her spoken to. "If she is a Confederate," he said, "the notes are gone long ago, but, in my opinion, she is merely an idiot." Flash notes. Oh, that was a footnote I was about to start reading. Anyway. "She's not the only idiot in this business," said Moncharmin pensively. "Well, who could have expected it?" moaned Richard. "But don't be afraid. Next time I shall have taken my precautions." The next time fell on the very day that witnessed the disappearance of Christine Daae. In the morning, a note from the ghost reminded the managers that the money was due. "Do just as you did last time," said Og amiably. "It worked very well. Put the 20,000 francs in the envelope and hand it to our excellent Madame Giry." The note was accompanied by the usual envelope. They had only to insert the notes. This was done about half an hour before the curtain rose on the first act of Faust. Richard showed the envelope to Moncharmin, then he counted the 20,000 franc notes in front of him and put the notes into the envelope, but without closing it. "And now," he said, "let's have Mother Giry in." The older woman was sent for. She entered with a sweeping curtsy. She still wore her black taffeta dress, the color of which was rapidly turning to rust and lilac, to say nothing of the dingy bonnet. She seemed in good temper. She at once said, "Good evening, gentlemen. It's for the envelope, I suppose?" "Yes, Madame Giry," said Richard most amiably, "for the envelope, and something else besides." "At your service, Monsieur Richard, at your service. And what is the something else, please?" "First of all, Madame Giry, I have a little question to put to you." "By all means, Monsieur Richard. Madame Giry is here to answer you." "Are you still on good terms with the ghost?" "Couldn't be better, sir, couldn't be better." "Ah, we are delighted. Look here, Madame Giry," said Richard in the tone of one making an important confidence. "We may just as well tell you among ourselves. You're no fool." "Why, sir," exclaimed the box-keeper, stopping the pleasant nodding of the two black feathers on her dingy bonnet, "I assure you no one has ever doubted that." "We are quite agreed, and we shall soon understand one another. The story of the ghost is just a good joke, is it not? Well, still between ourselves, it has lasted long enough." Madame Giry looked at the managers as though they were talking Chinese. She walked up to Richard's table and asked rather anxiously, "What do you mean? I don't understand." "Oh, you understand quite well. In any case, you've got to understand. And first of all, tell us his name." "Whose name?" "The name of the man whose accomplice you are, Madame Giry." I am the ghost accomplice." "I? His accomplice in what, pray?" "You do all his wishes." "Oh, he's not very troublesome, you know." "And does he still tip you?" "I can't complain." "How much does he give you for bringing him that envelope?" 10 francs. "You poor thing, that's not much, is it?" "Why?" "I tell you why precisely, Madame Giry. Just now we should like to know for what extraordinary reason you have given yourself body and soul to this ghost. Madame Giry's friendship and devotion are not to be bought for 5 francs or 10 francs. "That's true enough, and I can tell you the reason, sir. There's no disgrace about it. On the contrary." "We're quite sure of that, Madame Giry." "Well, it's like this, only the ghost doesn't like me to talk about his business." "Indeed?" sneered Richard. "But this is a matter that concerns myself alone. Well, it was in box 5 one evening. I found a letter addressed to myself, a sort of note written in red ink. I needn't read the letter to you, sir. I know it by heart, and I shall never forget it if I live to be 100. And Madame Giry, drawing herself up, recited the letter with touching eloquence. Madame, 1825. Mille Mentreur, a dancer, became Marquis de Cussy. 1832. Mille Marie Targlioni, a dancer, became Comets Gilbert des Vissonis. 1846. La Sota, a dancer, married a brother of the King of Spain. 1847. Lola Montes, a dancer, became the morganatic wife of King Louis of Bavaria, and was created Countess of Lansfield. 1848. Mille Maria, a dancer, became Baronne de Harnville. 1873. Therese Hessler, a dancer, married Dom Fernando, brother to the King of Portugal. Richard and Moncharmin listened to the old woman, who, as she proceeded with the enumeration of these glorious nuptials, swelled out, drew herself up to courage, and at last, in a voice bursting with pride, flung out the last sentence of the prophetic letter. 1885. Meg Giry, Empress. Exhausted by this supreme effort, the box-keeper fell into a chair, saying, Gentlemen, the letter was signed, Opera Ghost. I had heard speak of the ghost, but only half believed in him. From the day when he declared that my little Meg, the flesh of my flesh, the fruit of my womb, would be Empress, I believed in him altogether. And really it was not necessary to make a long study of Madame Giry's hysterical features to understand what could be got out of that fine intellect with the two words ghost and Empress. But who pulled the strings of that extraordinary puppet? That was the question. Have you never seen him? He speaks to you, and you believe all he says? Asked Moncharmin. Yes. To begin with, I owe it to him that my little Meg was promoted to be the leader of a row. I said to the ghost, if she is to be Empress in 1885, there is no time to lose. She must become a leader at once. He said, look upon it as done. And he had only a word to say to Monsieur Poligny, and the thing was done. So, you see that Monsieur Poligny saw him. No, not any more than I did, but he heard him. The ghost said a word in his ear, you know, on the evening when he left box 5, looking so pale. Moncharmin heaved a sigh. What a business, he groaned. Ah, said Madame Giry, I always thought there were secrets between the ghost and Monsieur Poligny. Anything that the ghost asked of Monsieur Poligny to do, Monsieur Poligny did. Monsieur Poligny could refuse the ghost nothing. You hear, Richard, Poligny could refuse the ghost nothing. Yes, I hear, said Richard. Monsieur Poligny is a friend of the ghost, and as Madame Giry is a friend of Monsieur Poligny, there we are. But I don't care a hang about Monsieur Poligny, he added roughly. The only person whose fate really interests me is Madame Giry. Madame Giry, do you know what is in this envelope? Why, of course not, she said. Well, look. Madame Giry looked into the envelope with a lackluster eye, which soon recovered its brilliancy, however. 1,000-franc notes, she cried. Yes, Madame Giry, 1,000-franc notes. And you knew it. I, sir? I swear. Don't swear, Madame Giry. And now I will tell you the second reason why I sent for you. Madame Giry, I'm going to have you arrested. The two black feathers on the dingy bonnet, which usually affected the attitude of two notes of interrogation, changed into two notes of exclamation. As for the bonnet itself, it swayed in menace on the old lady's tempestuous chignon. Surprise, indignation, protest, and dismay were furthermore displayed by little Meg's mother in a sort of extravagant movement of offended virtue, half bound, half slide, that brought her right under the nose of Monsieur Richard, who could not help pushing back his chair. Have me arrested! The mouth that spoke these words seemed to spit the 3 teeth that were left in it into Richard's face. Monsieur Richard behaved like a hero. He retreated no further. His menacing forefinger seemed already to point out the keeper of box 5 to the absent magistrates. I'm going to have you arrested, Madame Giry, as a thief. Say that again. And Madame Giry caught Mr. Manager Richard a mighty box on the ear before Monsieur Manager Moncharmin had time to intervene. But it was not the withered hand of the angry old bedlam that fell on the managerial ear, but the envelope itself, the cause of all the trouble, the magic envelope that opened with the blow, scattering the banknotes, which escaped in a fantastic whirl of giant butterflies. The two managers gave a shout, and the same thought made them both go on their knees, feverishly picking up and hurriedly examining the precious scraps of paper. Are they still genuine, Moncharmin? Are they still genuine, Richard? Yes, they're still genuine. Above their heads, Madame Giry's teeth were clashing in a noisy contest, full of hideous interjections, but all that could be clearly distinguished was this leitmotif. I, a thief! I, a thief! I! She choked with rage. She shouted, I never heard such a thing. And suddenly she darted up to Richard again. In any case, she yelped, you, Monsieur Richard, ought to know better than I where the 20,000 francs went to. I, asked Richard, astounded, and how should I know? Moncharmin looked severe and dissatisfied at once, instead that the good lady should explain herself. What does this mean, Madame Giry? He asked, and why do you say that Monsieur Richard ought to know better than you where the 20,000 francs went to? As for Richard, who felt himself turning red under Moncharmin's eyes, he took Madame Giry by the wrist and shook it violently. In a voice growling and rolling like thunder, he roared, Why should I know better than where the 20,000 francs went to? Why? Answer me. Because they went into your pocket, gasped the old woman, looking at him as if he were the devil incarnate. Richard would have rushed upon Madame Giry if Moncharmin had not stayed his avenging hand and hastened to ask her more gently. How can you expect my partner, Monsieur Richard, of putting 20,000 francs in his pocket? I never said that, declared Madame Giry, seeing that it was I myself who put the 20,000 francs into Monsieur Richard's pocket. And she added under her voice, There, it's out, and may the ghost forgive me. Richard began bellowing anew, but Moncharmin authoritatively ordered him to be silent. Allow me, let the woman explain herself. Let me question her. And he added, It is really astonishing that you should take up such a tone. We are not the verge of clearing up a whole mystery, and you're in a rage. You shouldn't behave like that. I am enjoying myself immensely. Madame Giry, like the martyr that she was, raised her head, which beamed with faith in her own innocence. You tell me there were 20,000 francs in the envelope which I put into Monsieur Richard's pocket, but I tell you again that I knew nothing about it, nor Monsieur Richard either, for that matter. Ha! Said Richard, suddenly assuming a swaggering air, which Moncharmin did not like. I knew nothing either. You put 20,000 francs in my pocket, and I knew nothing either. I am very glad to hear it, Madame Giry. Yes, the terrible dame agreed. It's true. We neither of us knew anything. But you must have ended by finding out. Richard would certainly have swallowed Madame Giry alive had Moncharmin not been there, but Moncharmin protected her. He resumed his question. What sort of envelope did you put in Monsieur Richard's pocket? It was not the one which we gave you, the one which you took to box 5 before our eyes, and yet that was the one which contained the 20,000 francs. I beg your pardon. The envelope which Monsieur le Directeur gave me was the one which I slipped into Monsieur le Directeur's pocket, explained Madame Giry. The one which I took to the ghost's box was another envelope, just like it, which the ghost gave me beforehand and which I hid up my sleeve. So saying, Madame Giry took from her sleeve an envelope ready prepared and similarly addressed to that containing the 20,000 francs. The managers took it from her. They examined it and saw that it was fastened with seals stamped with their own managerial seal. They opened it. It contained 20 Bank of St. Farc notes, like those which had so much astounded them the month before. How simple, said Richard. How simple, repeated Moncharmin. And he continued, with his eyes fixed upon Madame Giry, as though trying to hypnotize her. So it was the ghost who gave you this envelope and told you to substitute it for the one which he gave you. And it was the ghost who told you to put the other into Monsieur Richard's pocket. Yes, it was the ghost. Then, would you mind giving us a specimen of your little talents? Here's the envelope. Act as though we knew nothing. As you please, gentlemen. Madame Giry took the envelope with the 20 notes inside it, and made for the door. She was on the point of going out when the two managers rushed at her. Oh no, oh no! We won't be done a second time. Once beaten, twice shy. I beg your pardon, gentlemen, said the old woman in self-excuse. You told me to act as though you knew nothing. Well, if you knew nothing, I should go away with your envelope. And then how would you slip it into my pocket? Argued Richard, whom Moncharmin fixed with his left eye, while keeping his right on Madame Giry, and a proceeding likely to strain his sight. But Moncharmin was prepared to go to all lengths to discover the truth. I am to slip it into your pocket when you least expect it, sir. You know that I always take a little turn behind the scenes in the course of the evening, and I often go with my daughter to the ballet foyer, which I am entitled to do as her mother. I bring her shoes when the ballet is about to begin. In fact, I come and go as I please. The subscribers come and go too, so do you, sir. There are lots of people about. I go behind you and slip the envelope into the tail pocket of your dress coat. There's no witchcraft about that. No witchcraft, growled Richard, rolling his eyes like Jupiter Tonans. No witchcraft. Why, I've just caught you in a lie, you old witch. Madame Giry bristled, with her 3 teeth sticking out her mouth. And why, may I ask? Because I spent that evening watching box 5 and the sham envelope which you put there. I was not in the foyer of the ballet for 1 second. No, sir, I did not give you the envelope that evening, but at the next performance, on the evening when the Under-Secretary of State for Fine Arts. At these words, Monsieur Richard suddenly interrupted Madame Giry. Yes, that's true. I remember now. The Under-Secretary went behind the scenes. He asked for me. I went down to the ballet foyer for a moment. I was on the foyer steps. The Under-Secretary and his chief clerk were in the foyer itself. I suddenly turned round. I had felt you pass behind me, Madame Giry. You seemed to push against me. There was no one else behind me. Oh, I can see you still. I can see you still. Yes, that's it, sir, that's it. I had just finished my little business. That pocket of yours, sir, is very handy. And Madame Giry once more suited the action to the word. She passed behind Monsieur Richard, and so nimbly that Moncharmin himself was impressed by it, slipping the envelope into one of the tail pockets of Monsieur Richard's dress coat. Of course, exclaimed Richard, looking a little pale. It's very, very clever of O.G. The problem which he had to solve was this: how to get rid of any dangerous intermediary between the man who gives the 20,000 francs and the man who receives it. And by far the best notion he could hit upon was to come and take the money from my pocket without my noticing it, as I myself did not know that it was there. It's wonderful. Oh, wonderful, no doubt, Moncharmin agreed. Only, you forget, Richard, that I provided 10,000 francs of the 20, and that nobody put anything in my pocket. End of chapter 16. Interesting, constantly. We're getting closer and closer to the end, and my anticipation for the conclusion is being heightened, but we shall postpone until next time. Meanwhile, I have been thinking about what I'm going to read next. I looked at what are some of the popular books, popular classic books for 2025, and on the list were Wuthering Heights, Frankenstein, Dracula, The Great Gatsby. I have to choose something in the public domain. I can't remember if The Great Gatsby was actually in the public domain or not. Because I'm thinking about doing that one. But I also think either Dracula or Frankenstein would be really cool. If you have an opinion, let me know in the comments. But until next time, goodbye.